Alright, what's going on guys, it's Rest, and in this video I want to go over my Hyperion cat Amara build. Yes, you heard that correctly, I've heard all the comments, and it's finally time to update it. Now, as a little history, if you don't know, this is one of the first builds I made that was actually very popular, and on top of that, this is also one of the first builds I made where I actually started uploading save files. This has taken me way back actually updating this. It's kind of crazy to see how far the game and myself has came when going back and watching some of those videos. But if you haven't seen any of those, as a rundown of this build, this is simply a phase grass build that's based all around using a bunch of Hyperion SMGs, hence the name Hyperion Cat. In Borderlands 2, Maya had a cat class mod that was based all around increasing your SMG damage. That's where the name comes from. Hyperion obviously for the weapons, and then Cat since Maya was a siren and Amara is a siren in this game. It's very simple and very effective, and just using SMGs on a siren for some reason in Borderlands is always a very fun playstyle. Now we're going to say that this build is a better mobbing focused build than it is bossing, but as time went on, a lot of legendaries in the game just started to fall off a lot, and a bunch of the Hyperion SMGs don't perform like they used to. Yes, I'm talking about things like the hyper focus, which was and still is the main part of this build, but I'm having to include other things to essentially get the job done. So don't expect to go in melting bosses immediately. Like I said, it can get it done, but if you want to use additional weapons with this build to farm bosses really fast, this build will also work for that. It's just obviously the theme of this build is all around Hyperion. So if that interests you, as always, my builds are located in my Discord channel if you would like to download them. The link to the Discord will be in the description. If you're down with the build and enjoy the video, find it helpful in any way, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It's free, it really helps me out, and I truly appreciate it. While I have your attention, also, if any of you are playing Outriders and like my Borderlands content, be sure to check out some of the Outriders content I am posting, because I'm loving the demo. I cannot wait for the full game and expect to see a lot of videos on that alongside Borderlands, because as we all know, next week DLC 6 is coming out, and we're going to have our first true raid boss in the game, and I'm super excited. And I'm sure we'll also get a bunch of other legendary gear as well to make more builds on. So yeah, if you're interested in Outriders and even more Borderlands, be sure to stick around because the content is gonna be coming. But with all that aside, let's start going over this build. Alright, so starting off this build, like I said, the hyper focus is going to be the main focus of this build, no pun intended. This one right here, on Max Glen, the next two max have 100% bonus corrosive damage and its radiation. Now the reason I'm running this is because we're going to have access to all 5 elements on this one weapon right here. And the way we're going to do that is obviously with the anointment and the main gun itself, we have radiation and corrosive, but our shield is going to have incendiary damage, and we have all other 4 ASCs right here as well. So if I run something like cryo, I'm now going to have access to cryo damage. If it would equip, there we go, now I have access to cryo damage. And then on our skill tree, I have infusion, and we can run something like shock on infusion if we take that off, and now we have literally all 5 elements on this one weapon right here, which is very good for mobbing, because you don't ever have to worry about any elemental resists or anything. You can literally just have this one gun do everything for you, and it's super nice, and it's very fun to use. Now the other one I have right here is just a corrosive one with consecutive hits annoyance. This is really good for the takedowns. You know, like I was saying, these guns aren't the greatest anymore for bossing like they used to be, due to some of the changes they did with the way, you know, ASC stacks work. You're not getting these insane ricochets anymore, just doing a lot of damage. You're just getting a normal amount of damage, and it doesn't perform as well as it used to. But this can get the job done. I have ran the takedown with it, and you know, like I was also saying earlier, it's the other guns like the plasma coil are just gonna be better, but this gun can get the job done. Other ones over here, I have, you know, shock, corrosive, and incendiary, all with face slam annoyance. If you want to use these for bossing, this again can get the job done, but other stuff, if you use, you know, monarchs and anything, they're gonna be better. But you know, a hyper focus with incendiary face slam annoyance can take down Grave Warrior in 2 clips. You know, it used to be half the magazine, but you know, now it takes around 2 clips now at this point in the game. So that's why I also include something like the smog right here with the face slam annoying. You know, if you're trying to farm Grey Ward, this does work a little bit better than the hyper focus, but it's still, you know, it gets it down to where it takes about 1.5 clips instead of 2 clips to kill Grave Ward. You know, these guns are not the greatest anymore like they used to be, and it's made this build a lot harder to play. It's not that the build itself is bad by any means, it's just that these weapons just aren't what they used to be. But then I have a handsome jackhammer right here with, again, another face slam annoying. I always included this in every single one of these builds because this to me, is just a very fun weapon. You can literally just spam reload on this thing, and all your buffs you're getting, even with the Phase Slam annoy, the gun, when it bounces up and down, is getting the damage bonuses. So, you know, to kill a boss, you can just, you know, use your Phase Slam annoy, and then just start spamming reloads on something, and the boss will just eventually die. It's not like the greatest thing ever, but it's super fun, and I would highly recommend trying it out. Now, for the shield for this build, the main one I'm going to be running is the Plus Ultra all the time. We've already went over the anoint on it, so we can have all 5 elements on this one. But if you don't know, this is going to give you an insane amount of health and a very low shield capacity, but it recharges super quick. And also, when you're taking damage, you're going to get more axial cooldown rate, which is really good, paired with our Phase Archer. So whenever we use our axe scope, we get max rust axe. This is going to give you more gun damage and cooldown rate. But as you see, this one's giving you weapon damage, SMG damage, and Hyperion weapon critical hit damage. All of these are just insanely good for this build. It buffs the damage up on these things even more than they normally could go to. And I don't want to say it's necessary to have these bonuses, but I would say at least having Hyperion crit and maybe just a weapon damage is necessary at this point in the game with the way these weapons scale now. But then I have a problem with Alpha Knowledge. This is going to make it whenever you shoot an enemy, you're getting a stack of damage bonus. Works really well with consecutive hits, and that's what's allowing you to do things like the takedown. Then I have some old gods over here as well. If you're farming bosses specifically, you can pair them with the hyper focuses. So if you have an incendiary one, put the incendiary old god on, you get more incendiary damage, and you're going to get your axe glint to be incendiary damage. And that's another thing with this build. And I get into the skill tree, you have access to every element but cryo. I tried to make this a non-DLC build because I know a lot of people, when they play this build, you know, obviously this was a, you know, year 1 build, so we didn't have access to the skill tree. So if people, you know, still want to play it, you know, I didn't want to try to put any points in there. And also, most of these skills, other than maybe something like trusting yourself, isn't even that viable compared to the other skills that we're taking for this specific build. But speaking of the elements, if you're ever going into a boss fight, you know, Grave Ward is the easiest to explain. You can always equip Soulfire and then swap your axe skull elements out. So, you know, you can have your incendiary old god and then put a radiation, you know, its piss on, and it's just going to make you do a lot more damage no matter what gun you're using. And then obviously make sure you're matching the element. You know, for Grave Ward, you're using incendiary, and then put Phase Slam on to get the damage buff from the anoint. It's a lot of work that you have to do to get a damage out of this, but this is the way it used to be. And it's so funny to me having to include all this stuff again in a build, just, you know, for fighting bosses and stuff, because, you know, we now have things like URAD and stuff that you can just use. But with that aside, this is the updated version, so I was going to try to keep it fundamentally the way it used to be, but also update it enough to where it could be viable in the game now. So starting off with Mystical Assault, we have 5 points to do harm to buff our axial damage. This does buff our axial, and we're going to be running Ties to Bind or Phase Slam, you know, to proc the anoint, but Ties to Bind is the main thing. This will buff all the linked targets, and they will take increased damage from this. Then 1 point Violent Tapestry to help keep rush stacks up, plus you need to get to the bottom. 3 points of Fast Hands to get more reload speed, weapon swap speed, motion speed. 3 points of Transcend so we can actually critical hit damage whenever we use our axe go. Really good for bossing. It really helps out that lack of damage. 3 points in Alacrity. It could just be 2, but I had a point left over, so I just put it in Alacrity right here to get to 3. This is going to give you more reload speed based on the amount of rush stacks you have. Very good skill for Amara. You're going to be able to reload all your weapons really quickly. Then 1 point in Ascendant so we can buff whatever augment we're using, which I'm going to be running Still and Saman. This is my favorite thing to run with Ties to Bind because it just locks everybody up in the air and it makes them super easy to shoot. And, you know, you can run something like Soul Sap if you want healing, but you won't have to worry about healing for this build, trust me. But 3 points in Lay Bare, so you apply 25% damage debuff to whatever axe skill hits. Not only does this work with our Ties to Bind links, this also is going to work if our Phase Slam hits an enemy, and we can, you know, apply debuff, and then we can have our hyper focuses just do more damage to them as well. 3 points are fast, so we get 20% more damage, 20% more after we pop axe skill. Very good skill. 3 points to Awakening, so we buff all our rush stack effectiveness. Really good. 1 point in Remnant, so we can have an overkill up spawn that's going to help add clear even more, so it's going to go out and it's kill another enemy. Then finally 1 point Avatar, so we can pop axe skill twice for cooldown, and we get 10 more rush stacks, so essentially buff this whole skill tree. And, you know, having 2 Ties to Bind on cooldown is just insane. Plus with all our cooldown rate between our shield and Phase Archer, it's just ridiculous. But in Fist of Elements, 5 points of fusion, which I've already went over, so we can have access to all elements of one weapon. 3 points in Steady Hand, so we can handle the accuracy. Really good for SMGs. 5 points in Tempest, so we get more elemental damage. Very good, since this is, you know, a elemental focus build, as many builds are. 5 points on Wildfire, so we have a 40% chance to spread our elements, which is going to work really well with things like Harmageddon right here, because whenever you have an element on an enemy, they're taking 5% more damage. So the more elements we can spread to get on other enemies, the more damage they're going to be taking. So that's very, very good. And since we're running all 5 elements, you're going to have all 5 elements on an enemy. So they're going to have the max 25% from Armageddon at all times. But then 1 point dread, so when we kill an enemy that's phase grasp, our gun's instantly reloaded and we get a 15% damage bonus, which is nice. 1 point depot, we get 20% more magazine size with our elemental weapons. Then 1 point catharsis, so whenever we kill an enemy, they're going to explode. This does get mayhem scaling, so if the enemies are nearby, they're going to explode and do even more damage. 3 points of indiscriminate, so our bullets can ricochet. This works really well with the hyper focus, because now your bullets are hitting an enemy, ricocheting, and then they're also spreading, and the hyper focus itself is splitting the bullets, and it's just makes ag clear with the hyper focus insane. Like I said, mobbing for this build is top tier, 10 out of 10, but the bossing is just not what it used to be. I would say it's like a 6 to 7 out of 10, but 1 point sustainment, this is our healing skill. 1 point, this is way more than enough. You're going to get a lot of healing from this. All your weapons are elemental damage. You have huge magazines, and you're just going to be able to keep healing constantly. But then 1 point full expression, so we get 18% bonus damage or whatever axial element is. Really, really nice, just a nice damage bonus, you know, for the skill points we have left over. But then 3 points of personal space, so when we're close to an enemy, we get 54% bonus damage. Really, really good. This skill for 3 points is just ridiculous on Amara. It's always been one of her best skills, and you should pretty much take it in every build. But then 2 points in clarity, which is getting buffed to 5 of our class mod. This doesn't matter as much since we do have sustainment right here, but we are going to get a little health generation from this skill. 5 points in helping hands, so we get 40% damage reduction whenever we pop our axe skill, which will be all the time. So we're getting 40% damage reduction on top of us healing like crazy right here. So we should never have to die, and that's your main survivability of the build. On top of your plus ultra right here, giving you an insane health bar. You're never, like I said, you're never gonna die with this build. Then the damage output from this build is crazy for mobbing, but then for bossing, you might have to switch it up a little bit, but you can get it done. And if you don't want to, you know, add additional weapons to this, and you want to keep the Hyperion theme, it will be just fine. You're just not going to get the instant melt bosses like you see in some of my other builds and other people's builds as well. This is definitely taking what used to be an OP build and started leaning more towards thematic, but it's still on the OP side. You know, it hasn't completely reached over there yet, but it's still one of my favorite builds, and I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. Alright, well that's going to do it for the updated Hyperion Cat Amara build. I really hope you guys enjoy. I'm sorry if it let some of you guys down with the sheer power of this build, but it's just really not much else you can do since this is literally Hyperion SMG focus themed, and the Smog is probably the best Hyperion SMG in the game now, and the Hyper Focus is probably the second. So having those 2 weapons be the best and still not performing, you know, like other weapons can, you know, this is just the best that you can probably make it. But like I was saying, this build is still super fun, and if you're just going for, you know, I guess casual play or just mobbing even in high tier activities, this build and these weapons will still work well. Or like I said, if you want to put some additional weapons on this build to boss better, you can absolutely do that, and you will be able to take on the entire game on whatever difficulty you want to play on. Hopefully we'll eventually get a buff to something like the Hyper Focus again, or even some of the other Hyperion SMGs, so we can add those to this build, because if that does happen, or even if the new DLC comes out with some new Hyperion SMG, this build is going to be S+ tier like it once was back in the day. But that is all for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.